Teach me about the Great Lakes. Teach me about the Great Lakes. Welcome back to Teach Me About the Great Lakes, a twice monthly podcast in which I, a Great Lakes novice, ask people who are smarter and harder working than I am what exactly the intro to the show is. But this, everybody, is an emergency Teach Me About the Great Lakes, Ask Dr. Fish crossover episode. So hold on, where's the siren? I know I got, yes, here we go. That's right, we're calling in the Dr. Fishes themselves. Because this is not just Teach Me About the Great Lakes. We are happy to be joined today by the cast of Ask Dr. Fish, Dr. Catfish, Katie O'Reilly, aquatic invasive species specialist for Illinois Indiana Sea Grant, I think is actually what that is. What's up, Katie?
What's up, Stuart? I mean, it's an emergency. You got to pull in the big guns.
We pulled in the big guns, the three biggest guns I know. And here with the howitzer, well, we'll be talking about that later. Titus Saulheimer, Dr. Fish, SG, Wisconsin Sea Grant. Titus, how are things up in Wisconsin? Frozen lakes?
Yeah, frozen lakes, dead sturgeon. It's a beautiful time of year to be here, and it is great to see all of you. I have missed talking to you, so I'm glad that this is happening.
Yes. And then also joining us, the heart and soul of Ask Dr. Fish herself. She's been on assignment. We've been without her. We're so glad she's here. Carolyn Foley, research coordinator, Illinois Indiana Sea Grant, and the finest research coordinator in the whole network. And that includes you, listener. What's up, Carolyn?
Not much. Also excited about the snow, though. Dead sturgeon. I mean, I think it's well known by now that I really love sturgeon, so I'm excited to talk about them, but not necessarily when they're dead.
Yeah, what is more exciting than a dead sturgeon?
A live one.
Yes, probably a live one.
Okay.
And even better than that,
else.
a baby live sturgeon is the best.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's true. I mean, there's a reason that sturgeon are a multiple time runner-up for Great Lakes Animal of the Year. Well, listener, the reason that we have gotten this emergency recording together is we saw news stories that just demanded to be discussed by Ask Dr. Fish. I was going to discuss them just with myself, and I said that is insufficient. I was going to discuss them with just Carolyn, and we said no, this is insufficient. We need the doctor's fish. And so today we have three stories. Does this count as Great Lakes news as well? Nah, it's not Great Lakes news. There's Great Lakes news coming up, though.
It's great fish news.
Great fish news. Anyway, the reason we had to call in I think I already mentioned that, so I will then move on. What is the emergency? The emergency is sturgeon news. Lots of sturgeon news. Carolyn, what's the first sturgeon story we're talking about today? The SS.
Right. So I think we've talked about this a little bit before on this show about the sturgeon fishing season. And so sturgeon are it's not very long, right, Katie? Can you tell me a little?
No, sturgeon are actually pretty long.
Yeah, sturgeon are very long. Sturgeon fishing season, right. Not so much. And this year, in one location in the Great Lakes, northern Michigan, the sturgeon season was even shorter than usual. It set a record being all of 17 minutes long for the total time the season was open. So very, very short in comparison to the very, very long sturgeon. Setting this record.
And the far superior Wisconsin spearing season that I will taunt Michigan with when any chance I get.
I'm here for your taunting of Michigan, but let's back it up a little bit. So sturgeon, they're big fish, and they're normally not legal to catch, right? But there's a spear fishery. Is that right, Titus? And why is there a spear fishery? Why is that legal when other formats aren't?
Yeah, I mean, there are different rivers. The Menominee River, for example, between Michigan and Wisconsin has a hook and line fishery. And, there are places you can catch them. The Chippewa River, rivers mainly. But so we go, the kind of long-standing tradition here is spear fishing through the ice. And this has been kind of a way to catch sturgeon. I didn't bring any of my sturgeon decoys because I wasn't thinking of that. But You basically cut a big hole in the ice. You drop down a decoy, which might be a fish, it might be a Barbie car, and the sturgeon are curious and they come to look at it, and then you stab them with a spear. And so, it's kind of gruesome. It is. I've been to the check-in station here in Wisconsin, and it's both sad and amazing because you're like, oh, that's like 100-year-old fish that was swimming around, and now someone's going to eat it, which, that's not terrible, but yeah.
At least they eat it. So we don't have the video right now, but I actually didn't know that it was you put a decoy and they're curious, and it just feels so. I was like, oh no, goodness gracious. But knowing that people actually eat it helps my brain a little bit. Go ahead, Katie.
No, and I was just going to say, I think to give some context for those who might not be familiar, the reason these seasons are so limited and why there are limits on sturgeon you can catch, outside of the season is because the species was overfished in the Great Lakes. They used to, pre-European settlement of the basin, they were super abundant, used by native peoples in the basin for food, part of like the culture. But with settlement, we started to see, decreases both due to the overfishing, due to loss of their spawning habitat by building dams on rivers that allowed, prevented them from getting to places to spawn. So we knock their numbers down a lot. And as Titus alluded to, they take a long time to reproduce because they're these old, slow growing fish. So the fact that we're now being able to have these limited harvests is actually a sign of success. So as sad as it seems, it's actually showing that, people have been doing the work to restore them. It takes a long time to see results, but we're starting to see that. And by having these sort of short but heavily managed seasons, we can still, allow people to fish and have these kind of fun experiences with them while also maintaining these populations for the future so that we don't have 17-minute seasons in the future, and maybe it's a little bit more of a balanced fishery.
And so it's 17 minutes because it's really limited in terms of number of fish, right? I think it said it was 6 fish in this article.
6 fish.
Okay.
Yep. And so basically with Black Lake, at least this year, the DNR required that if you caught a sturgeon, like you had to text in essentially to the DNR that you caught it so they could keep track. And that, because again, 17 minutes is not a super long time when you've got people in sort of ice shanties across the lake. So yeah, so definitely is limited because you only have a certain quota of number of fish that can be caught.
So being there at one of these events, is it just kind of like chaos? And like, do they have like an air horn when they hit their final, like, stop fishing? Or how do they communicate with the people who are participating in the event?
Yeah, so I mean, Wisconsin has the Lake Winnebago system, and so it is, and this is the way ours works because we have a lot more sturgeon, and they've been protected. Like very early on, a century ago, it was, there were declines, and everyone was like, "Hey, we need to do something about this," and that kind of resulted in, we don't have to have a 17-minute season here because it's been managed so well. And the way our fishery works is there's like there are quotas for juvenile females, adult females, and males. And anytime when they hit 90% of those quotas, then it closes. I think the next day is the last day. Just to make sure they don't go over that. So with Black Lake, I mean, obviously if you're texting, hey, I got a sturgeon, they're very small numbers, and they're going to, and it's also very, it's a much smaller lake, I assume. I don't like Lake Winnebago is huge. It's, like you can't, if you're on the north end, you can't see the south end because it's miles and miles long. And there's like 20 different check-in stations, and but yeah, it is, it's very important to, I think, to make sure that it's a really managed fishery, and, specifically like, males and females, and like really controlling, which, there's not a lot of fisheries where every single fish that's harvested is like inspected and, the DNR actually has to see all of these. And for us, it's like 2 p.m. Like you have to have your fish registered by 2. And that's, you don't want to get caught with the sturgeon, an unregistered sturgeon outside of those hours, because you're going to get in trouble.
And just to add to that too, when they check in the sturgeon, they also often take samples for, scientists to do analysis of age, diet. So in addition to being eaten, we are getting scientific information collected from the caught fish as well.
That's really, really cool. So I just want to, for the, ice fishing and stuff like that, I've been really excited to see that people actually are able to ice fish this year. Like every time I go over certain rivers, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're actually able to do it. So that was exciting. So Stuart, we have another sturgeon story that we wanted to talk about. Do you want to introduce that one?
We do. That actually, the sturgeon fishing season was not the emergency.
No,
it
wasn't.
happened.
It just was a happy coincidence.
But that was a happy coincidence. All right. The real emergency, this is from USA Today, For the Win, which is one of their blogs, I suppose. Anyway, I'll just read the headline. Giant sturgeon attacks show mermaid in shocking video. And so there's a Instagram post on this, and you can go ahead and click on that and watch it. Oh my God, I've never seen it before. Holy smokes. So here's what happened. They've got a mermaid. First of all, it's not clear where they got a mermaid, right? That in and of itself is impressive. I used to visit Tarpon Springs, Florida when I lived down there, and they had mermaids there too. There are not many of these. They're very rare in the wild. But she's just there dancing as a mermaid does. And underwater, of course, because she would like to breathe. And so she's sitting underwater. And then there's a very large sturgeon, like 6, I'm going to call it 100 feet. But it's probably closer to, 6+ feet. And it's swimming by her.
Yeah, it's definitely over 6 feet.
It's definitely over 6 feet.
That is a Chinese sturgeon,
okay.
Stuart.
That is a Chinese sturgeon, and it's just swimming over, and it opens its mouth and like sucks her head as if it were a crawfish. What is happening here? Tell me about Chinese sturgeon, and is this something that happens often? And how should they have Chinese sturgeons or any sturgeons in a tank with endangered mermaids? Dr. Fish, what is going on here?
So the Chinese sturgeon is a relative of the lake sturgeon that we have here in the Great Lakes. As both you and Titus alluded to, they can get really big, up to about 16 feet long. But they are not like these man-killing machines that the clickbaity title will, might make you think.
Yeah, we can have a whole discussion about the way they characterize the attack of the sturgeon. Yes, Katie and I both use quotes marks at the same time because yes.
Well, attack to me, kind of gives off this malicious intent that the sturgeon is not going after this mermaid specifically. And the fact that sturgeon don't have teeth kind of, lessens the feel of attack. So just like our lake sturgeon, Chinese sturgeon basically are vacuum cleaners. They, float or swim along the bottom and suck up, any kind of small bug fish hanging out in the benthos. So it's kind of hard to believe that, this was not just a kind of wrong place, wrong time type thing. And just to note, the mermaid was okay. She had a couple of bruises. Her goggles got knocked off, but we are not mourning the loss of a mermaid here.
Yeah. I mean, I would say it's the same, it's the same as a shark attack. Like it is, shark, they're not attacking people. They just bite people because they think they're food. And then they're like, this isn't food. I don't like this. And then, right. They leave. And I think it's the same thing with the sturgeon. Like sturgeon are curious. And it was like, hey, there's this thing that I can fit that in my mouth. So I'm going to try it. And, it was, if you watch the video, it's like, right over the head and she swims out and, gets
right.
away. It's not like, this sturgeon was aggressively, like, it is very lackadaisical. Just, I'm cruising around. I'm
spoken like a man who's not being
sturgeon.
bitten by a sturgeon right now.
Man, I would love to have that happen, though. It would be awesome.
You've been chosen by the sturgeon. It is an honor.
Yeah.
Well, so, okay. And Stuart, getting back to your one question, should we have sturgeon in the aquarium with mermaids? And my thought would be like, get the mermaid out of the aquarium, because the Chinese sturgeon is actually critically endangered. So these guys are, sort of found in the rivers of like Southeastern Asia, China. And because of pollution, their numbers have basically cratered. And a lot of the reproduction that's being maintained is through hatcheries and aquariums. So they're a species that, without having some kind of human influence and like helping keep their numbers up, might not still exist in the wild were it not for places like hatcheries and aquariums. So my vote is get the mermaid out of the tank, keep the sturgeon.
Yeah, and I don't want to break. Stuart's sitting down. Stuart, mermaids aren't real. There's no such thing as mermaids. So keep them out of those tanks. Agree.
Yeah. So
there are like 8 billion people, but only a few Chinese sturgeons.
Only a few Chinese sturgeons.
One or two.
Right. So, okay. So I had a question about, let's bring it back to what's kind of our region, like the Great Lakes kind of stuff. One of the large aquariums that we all know and love is the Shedd Aquarium. How common is it in, say, the US to have people who go in with the fish? Like, I want to say I've seen people like cleaning the tanks maybe, but not so much like performing with the fish now as I did, say, when I was like 7 or things like that. Is that an accurate statement? Do you know? And I know that I'm throwing this at you cold, but do you guys happen to know?
I mean, I would say at least in the good freshwater aquariums where you would see a cool sturgeon, you're not going to see that. Although, we do have what I enjoy, the sturgeon touch tanks at Shedd Aquarium and Discovery World in Milwaukee. Like, if you want to kind of lightly pet one, that's okay. But yeah, I think, sometimes, like, I've seen scuba divers in some of those larger tanks and aquariums, but they're not, it's usually not mermaid scuba divers. It's, people actually doing things. So I think if the focus is more of the science, they're probably less likely to have performers.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the one time I see like performers, it seems like it's more tied with that sort of utility of cleaning or feeding or something. But it does seem like there are a lot of Santa scuba divers around Christmas time throughout zoos and aquariums. That seems like that's still held on. But as long as Santa's doing science, he's cool.
Okay, cool.
He's like scrubbing the glass or something, cleaning up algae.
Algae.
Putting Santa to work.
Santa needs something to do, the other 364 days.
Yeah, put him to work cleaning some tanks. That sounds great. So that kind of leads us into our another critical story that we needed to talk about, where I did used to see some performers or like people working particularly is with the mammal shows, right? So like if you had dolphins or whales, beluga whales, or things like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, they still have that at Shedd. Actually, they have dolphin shows and the beluga whale is still a Shedd. And this is cool stuff. I mean, this is the challenge. This is a different episode we don't have to get into. But, all these things are really neat, right? And I used to love going to SeaWorld as a kid. It was a formative experience for me, while recognizing that there is a lot that at a minimum needs to be rethought about the way we do that stuff. And probably some of it just shouldn't be done. But that said, as Carolyn said, it's a nice transition into this story, which is more of a science story. These last two are, so we give you some goofy stuff, some silly stuff to try to lure you in so that we can focus on the hardcore
the real
science.
Hard science.
Yeah. And so this next story is more on the science side, but we appreciate you sticking with us. And that is this new study out. River dolphins launch pee streams into the air. This is a write-up at Ars Technica, which we will put in there. And these are some researchers at the Cetacea Research Group in Ontario, Canada, doing some studies on, I will quote the article, 36 cases of another human-like behavior, what appears to be some sort of cetacean pissing contest. Sandy, I don't know if you need to bleep that out or not, but here we go. We got a cetacean peeing contest.
I believe it's a scientific term if it's used in the article.
It's in the article. It's not in the journal article, but it is in the write-up. Yeah. All right.
Enough.
O'Reilly, Katie O'Reilly, have you ever been in a cetacean pissing contest?
I cannot say I have. I mean, I think that comes with the territory of the Great Lakes. We don't have any marine mammals, so unfortunately there have not been any cetacean peeing contests in my research. But it is an interesting article because, as funny of a topic as it is, it's kind of a behavior that has not been observed before in these river dolphins. And there aren't you think about things like dogs or cats, they often pee to mark their territory. And that's a pretty common behavior in terrestrial or land dwelling animals, but it's not something we see or have seen at least very often in the aquatic sphere. So this is kind of a cool, leap forward, I guess, into the study of understanding pee and aquatic creatures.
Yeah, critical school.
Exactly.
No, this was. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just want to read the actual scientific title of the paper, which is aerial urination. Okay, aerial urination suggests undescribed sensory modality and social function in river dolphins, which, great work for the group of Canadian biologists who did this study. And thank you, Canada.
No, that's true. But this was something they noticed. They were studying the dolphins anyway, right? And they happened to notice this and wrote it up. Carolyn, you're coming to the defense of the entire nation of Canada, it sounds like.
Well, no, it was for the Canada geese. They're just, for the record, they're not Canadian geese, they're Canada geese. But we can go back to dolphins for a sec. Something I think it's I appreciated that Katie said that it seems really funny and we anthropomorphize it, which is at our human characteristics.
Because we're all 8 years old at our core.
But it is kind of a genuinely, I can imagine being the scientist who sees this, did you see that? Did that really just happen? And then they see it repeated and they're like, what the heck is going on?
Times.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's, the thrill of the scientific discovery, even if it's something goofy like that, is a lot of fun. So I appreciate that we're talking.
And there is a lot to learn, right? This might be some sort of, it might be a peeing contest, a display of dominance, kind of like Katie was saying, or marking of territory. Probably not marking of territory, I guess, in the sense that it flows away pretty quickly. But it also might be some other communication, is my understanding, based, because dolphins don't have strong smell or taste, but maybe the peeing, the streaming of pee into the air might be some other form of communication.
Well, and to go to the paper, the receiver individual actually actively seeks the urine stream with its rostrum. So that's what its nose. They're really, I don't know, guy dolphins are just like human guys, I guess. We do dumb stuff, and I don't think we do this, but
I was going to say,
back up.
It's in the same. Yeah. Edit that out. In fact, we'll never do this show again.
Yeah.
But I mean,
nothing turns you into a gender essentialist like Titus has been canceled. Nothing turns.
But I think it's
go ahead.
interesting. Speaking of kind of the gender, in some animals, it's used as a form of chemical communication because it can help a female or male understand if another species or another individual is getting ready to breed. It can be a display of dominance, just in terms of the chemical, knowing where you're at in the social hierarchy. So there's a lot of things that, again, as humans, we don't necessarily have that. So it can be tough to understand sort of the social aspect of why these behaviors like are done in order to, keep a population of animals functioning together.
And thinking of, I guess, because they're dolphins, like, there's only it's hard to pee on somebody underwater, right? So they really have to flip on their backs and, do that. Like, just thinking about other mammals that might use urine to leave messages. Like, you can just, you're a wolf or something, and you leave that tag over there basically, and everyone can check it out and they know who you are and what you're doing. But yeah, it would be harder if you're in the Amazon. So it's amazing what these dolphins do.
Well, and I think one of the things that was interesting, at least in the write-up, was talking a little bit about how this behavior hasn't been seen in many aquatic species, but there are some fish like African cichlids that appear to use, urine as a chemical communication. Even some crayfish use it to display dominance. But I wonder if it's one of those things that we just, if those scientists hadn't been observing the dolphins and seen like, oh, there's this weird thing happening. Like if we're not actively looking for it, it could be a behavior that's happening that we just haven't observed yet as scientists.
I mean, what if the scientists like were feeding the dolphins asparagus and then they're like, whoa, this is so weird. Check it out. So that could be the whole reason.
I'd like to see that in the methods section of the paper.
And if indeed we do, I can promise you right now, we'll have an emergency episode of Ask Dr. Fish. Dr. Catfish, Katie O'Reilly, Dr. Fish SG, Titus Seilheimer. Where can people find you these days if they want to ask you about dolphin pee, killer sturgeon, or...
What's spawning now?
Yes, wait a minute. We have Dr. Fish on, we have Titus on, and we didn't ask the key question. Hold tight. Tell me, Titus, who's spawning now? Tell me, Titus, who's spawning now? Titus, Dr. Fish, tracker of spawn. Who is spawning now? So we are recording this on February 10th. It's kind of cold. This will probably be released in first week of March. Third week of March, something like that. I can't remember how far ahead or behind we are. Listener, Inside Baseball, we're starting to record more in advance. It enables us to get these done and hopefully have the podcast be regular, which it was not for the last year. But the point is this, who's spawning now?
Yeah, I was going to throw out my favorite, the burbot, which does spawn right now in February, but and I just ate burbot like 2 weeks ago. So check it out. Go to Freshwater Feasts, which is the Michigan Sea Grant blog with recipes and my simple, delicious burbot recipes on there. But what I'm going to do, I am going to switch it up. I'm going to say the bloaters, bloater chubs. You might know them as smoked chubs. If you've gone to a fish market, you've seen them there. Bloaters, they are spawning right now. This is the time when, some folks will go out the commercial fishery for them. It's a lot smaller in Lake Michigan these days, but when they do target them, right now is a good time because you can get those ripe fish with the eggs. And that is actually harvested, used, and sent overseas for caviar in places like Scandinavia. So the chub, it's basically, take a whitefish or take a Cisco, shrink it down to, just like, I don't know, 8 or 10 inches and, much smaller, but also in the Coregonus genus. Hoi is the Hoyi is the scientific name, Coregonus hoyi. And yeah, so it is, they are spawning now. So they're, deep cold water, 400 feet deep, and they're just kind of hanging out on the bottom spawning. And yeah, so a pretty neat species, has been important as a commercial species over the years. And actually, where I'm at, they've actually, the local commercial fishermen with their trawl boats have actually harvested them this time of year And then the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service took those the eggs and the milt, and they actually did this like mini spawning. And they grew those in a hatchery, and they have stocked those into Lake Ontario as trying to restore this species back to Lake Ontario. So important kind of winter things happening with the bloaters.
There we go.
Yeah, and hopefully too, especially, some of the species like the bloaters rely on having ice cover to help protect them as the eggs are developing. So this year has been better in the Great Lakes than we have had in the last couple of years with having some ice coverage. So hopefully those eggs keep nice and safe before the hatching.
Perfect. And for more observations on bloater milt or whatever, Titus, where can people go to find you these days?
So I'm on Blue Sky at Dr. Fish SG as usual, my usual handle, or, look me up at Wisconsin Sea Grant, send me an email. Don't call me. I probably won't answer the phone, but I'll, potentially read your email someday. And if it's something interesting and fun, I'll respond right away.
There you go. So instant judgment. If you don't get a reply within about a day, your email was neither interesting nor fun.
Or it went
I guess
to
it could have
spam.
been either interesting or fun, but not both.
But it could have gone to spam.
Yeah, or at least that's what Titus said. It could have.
Yeah.
Or Titus could
Stuart,
tell you.
all of Stuart's emails go to spam. So.
Right.
I was going to say, you have like a rule in your inbox,
It's a
from
spam
Stuart
filter.
Carlton.
I actually have a spam filter and a Stuart filter. So
Dr. Katie O'Reilly, where can people find you these days?
Similar. So you can find me on Blue Sky at Dr. Catfish, and also emails, but I will probably, I'll go one further than Titus and say it probably will be, even if your email is interesting, it probably will be a while before I can get to you, but I will try.
Just hit the social. That's what it's for. These little interactions.
Just hit the social.
Just do it.
It's that instant serotonin.
There it is. Or don't. Actually, right. More to the point. Anyway, we'll be back soon. Probably this. I don't want to promise anything, but we want to get Ask Dr. Fish going again. It's just been a heck of a year, and it's only getting heckier. But in the interim, thank you so much for helping us in this emergency. It's good to know that when emergencies happen, we can still count on our two doctors, Fish.
Teach Me About the Great Lakes is brought to you by the fine people at Illinois Indiana Sea Grant. We encourage you to check out the cool stuff we do at iiseagrant.org and at ILIN Sea Grant on Facebook, Blue Sky, and other social media.
Our senior producer is Carolyn the Full Dog Foley, and Teach Me About the Great Lakes is produced by Megan Lake Lover Gunn and Renee Miles. Ethan Chitty is our associate producer and our fixer. Riley Ramsey is taking care of business. And our super fun podcast artwork is by Joel Davenport. The show is edited. Unfortunately for her, it's her job, but she doesn't get paid. Not enough. By Sandra Swoboda.
If you have a question or comment about the show, please email it to teachmeaboutthegreatlakes@gmail.com or leave a message on our smoking hot hotline at 765-496-IISG or 765-496-4474. Either way, thanks for listening and keep grading those books.